All right, welcome back to Black and White. It's now 3 minutes after 8 o'clock, and today we're going to be talking about divorce. I'll shortly introduce the guests that we have here in studio, but let's start off with our entry point, which is a story that has been on the dailies and all over for a while now. And a magistrate's court here in Nairobi has for the second time heard details surrounding the Meru senator and Marianne Kitani's divorce case. Kitani, who testified for 4 hours, told the court that Linturi showed elders divorce papers confirming that he was not married to any other woman at the time of the customary marriage. Linturi has denied ever getting married to William Ruto's former chief of staff in what is already shaping up to be a dramatic case.
In another blow-by-blow account, Marianne Kitani for the second day and in 4 hours sought to prove that her marriage to Meru Senator Mithika Linturi was legitimate. The senator had referred to her as a visitor to his house. The former chief of staff at the deputy president's office had the court hear that Linturi married her 3 years ago in a traditional ceremony. The woman in her 40s has told the court that her ceremony was held in Nandi and marriage vows exchanged according to the Nandi and Meru customary laws. Kitani says that it was then that the senator was asked for some 6 cows, which in exchange was paid in cash at 100,000 shillings as dowry. Kitani also told the court that the senator bought Kitani's mother a Nissan X-Trail as a gift. She told the court that she built Linturi's parents a house worth 8 million shillings.
How much did you pump in to build decent home for your father-in-law and mother?
The total 8 million Kenya shillings.
The court sitting in Nairobi heard in the 4-hour submissions how Marianne Kitani and the Meru senator had to take Mira and Mursik during the customary marriage traditions, although they both didn't like it. They did it for love. Kitani averred.
Did you take the Mursik yourself?
Yes, I did.
Did you see your now husband take the Mursik?
Yes, he did. Even though he doesn't like milk, he had to take, and he took.
It was her evidence that she became and began to play her role as wife to Mithika, narrating extensively how and what she did and telling the court that the senator liked what she did.
As a wife, I made sure he was well groomed, he ate, he slept.
Slowly.
Kitani's lawyers have applied to have the court summon the DCI and the Registrar of Marriage and Births. The application is set to be ruled upon on August 28th of this year. Brian Obuya, KTN News.
And there you have it. That's what's happening in that particular area. But we'd like to widen that scope and generally talk about divorce. And if there are any questions that you have regarding divorce, whether it is on the social end of it or the legal, that's what we'd like to address this morning. Now, joining me in studio are 2 lovely ladies. I'll start with one on my immediate right, and that's Elsie Mwangi, who's a marriage and family therapist. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for
We're also
having
joined
me.
by Mweni Nyokavi, who is from Musimi and Company Advocates, but also an advocate and a certified mediator.
Thank you.
Ladies, thank you for joining us this morning. I'll represent the male voice for gender balance. But there you go. So divorce, of course, is something that nobody really looks forward to, because at the point where people are coming together, there is an understanding and a hope that that's a love that's going to last. But sometimes things don't work out the way they are expected. So let me start with you, Elsie. And maybe what is it you'd find, maybe from your experience in counseling and, offering therapy services to married couples, what is the things that you see stand out that possibly cause divorce or bring people to that point where that love is no longer holding that relationship together?
There are so many things that come into play leading to divorce. But for me as a therapist, I'm a believer in the power of self-awareness and early childhood experiences. These other things come to add on top of who we are. In fact, in real sense, if we are able to understand who we are, how we became, and be aware of what we went through, the experiences, the images that we picked, that may be a really good foundation for us to be able to deal with these other things that are coming in that are leading to divorce.
Are you then suggesting that at the point where people are coming together, there needs to be that self-awareness? Because we all, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, come with baggage, as it were.
A lot of it, yes.
Okay, so how do we get that self-awareness?
Normally in counseling, we help clients go back to the moment they realized that they exist. What is it that you have experienced from that time to date? How did you address those things? What were the experiences? What were the images? And we normally say that some of those things that we went through inform us a lot in how we think, how we feel, how we perceive, and how we behave. Yeah.
All right, let me come to you, Nyokavi. In your experience, I'm sure you have also handled very many cases where either it has ended up in divorce or was looking towards divorce, and maybe that through mediation that happened. Are there things that stand out for you that possibly makes people get to that point of divorce?
Yes, I think the things that stand out in terms of the conflicts that come up in relationship is usually around money, intimacy, sexual intimacy, third parties. And third parties is everyone, including in-laws, how we deal with friends. And then we've seen a new one that keeps coming up, belief systems. What doctrines, what worldview do you hold to? And I see that, I think underlying all these things is a question of, do I trust this person and how they make their judgments around these issues? And that's usually then what emerges from stories when people come to us asking for advice or asking for divorce.
Okay. At the point where people are coming to you to seek your services, whether for divorce or mediation, are there times that mediation works?
Yes, it does. It very much so. And it may not always resolve an issue at the level of couples getting back together, but you see there are so many layered things happening in a family situation, including where children are involved, how to separate property, how to deal with other family interests. And mediation sometimes does help people get back together, because having a third party, just another voice in the middle of the fray,
a neutral party.
A neutral party who's not invested in the outcome, who's not in the fight with you, is able to help temperatures calm down, and then have a more open, more honest conversation. Then you're able to see, okay, this person is not attacking me. They are afraid about this, or they are angry about this. Is this something we can resolve? Yes, it is. Or if not, how then do we deal with it? It gives you a better outcome than fighting
all through.
Yeah.
All right, Elsie,
Yes.
looking at now this case that we've just seen, and of course we've read through some of the stories, this is probably, I don't know whether it's an extreme end, to call it an extreme end, where people are willing to divulge very personal information, and it almost looks like an attack at each other in the public eye. What is it that would bring people to that level where, because you could still deal with the same issue and go separate ways, but very quietly and in a less public way?
Now, looking at it at the point at which it is, I was looking at conflicts within a family setting. Conflicts are normal within a family, but we need to understand what are the levels of conflict. I think for this case that is before us, it is about how much were they able to handle the first stages of the conflict. I think they were not able to handle it the first 4 or 5 stages, so they are up there, where now they are at the point of personal attacks. I have a face to save, and that is where now the real issues are not dealt with. We try to bring in other things. I destroy you to paint myself clean. Yeah.
So this is, and I don't want to use just this as a case, but where we find marriages going sour, at the point where people are willing to attack each other, as it were, in public, are we then saying that the issue may not be what they're presenting, but maybe something deeper?
In fact, you've put it so well. Most of the cases that we handle, when the clients come to us, what they bring on the table we call it the presenting problem. It is never the real thing. It is just a symptom. So when we dig deeper into the issue, we find that there are so many other things. This is just something very small that has broken everything. Like now the can of worms, every other thing is coming out.
Coming out.
Yeah.
Okay. Nyokavi, are these areas, if we are well schooled and maybe counseled, that we can avoid getting to this point?
You know, in fact, listening to Elsie, I could not agree more. Half the time, what is coming to us is a presenting problem. And as lawyers, we're usually dealing with it at the level of legal issues. What are the grounds you're facing in terms of marriage? What do you present to a court? If it's children's issues, what are we dealing with in terms of custody and access and maintenance? But you'll find what's behind that is a long history of distrust, of something else that has happened. You didn't apologize this time, or somebody has a repeated behavior, which they may not even be aware of, that has been poking at you, and you've ended up here. I think what would be helpful, I know I know particularly for churches have been trying to do premarital counseling for people who are then going into marriage. I also know, just listening to them, it's also a very short course to do. What Elsie has said about self-awareness before you get into the situation is very important. I don't think we are as aware of ourselves as we imagine ourselves to be. And when we're getting into marriage, there's planning, there's money, there's in-laws, there's family things. It's a very difficult time to start taking stock of, why am I going into this institution? Am I aware of what is likely to come out of it? Am I aware that I'm definitely going to face conflict? Do I know how to manage it? Yes, being aware of these things before is critical.
It's critical. All right, and we'll come to the legal side of it and what the law says regarding marriage, who is married, who is not, who has what rights. But I'd like us to deal with some of these, I don't know whether to call them softer issues, but you've mentioned some of them. Let's start with money, because I know that's normally a big one. And Elsie, is this because the couple that have come together have not maybe had this discussion and they're probably pulling separate ways when it comes to their vision, when it comes to money? Or what is it that would bring money as an issue at that point?
In fact, for me, I would say that money, it is not even secondary. It is ikombali kiasi. Nyokavi has talked about premarital counseling. When this couple to be are being taken through premarital counseling, a competent counselor should be able to take them through all these things, all the contextual issues that they will find within the marriage. And one of the things that we do is empowering the couple with something we call a resource map. We help them identify what are these things that they may expect. How do they anticipate to handle these things? If, for example, it is I and my husband to be, what is it that he would expect from me in terms of finances? What is it that I would expect from him? Again, when I was talking about childhood experiences, there are those things that we saw from our parents, especially for those families that are open enough. If the parents were open to the children about how to handle money, it would not be so difficult for the couple to be able to handle these things. Again, when we talk about the resource map, if we find that the couple to be are not really empowered to handle these things, back to self-awareness. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are your vulnerabilities? Then if it is about the weaknesses, what do I need to work on to improve that weakness to a higher level? If it cannot be turned to a strength, I accept it as it is.
As it is.
But be aware all along that the decisions that I make, they will be somehow informed by who I am, how I came to be, so that when I am about to make a decision, I sit down first and ask myself, what is informing this decision? Because when we come into a marriage relationship, we accept to be part of the other person's team. And a team is about working together. A marriage cannot survive on two people who seem to be working on a project and one is bringing in some resources and another one is pulling the resources away. Of course, a conflict will
Okay,
arise.
still on money, Elsie, Nyokavi, is this money that comes after people have gotten married? Because I would like to assume at the point where they love each other or think they love each other, because there's also that aspect where sometimes you imagine you do, but
It's a perception.
yeah, perception is different from reality. Is it money that has come into the relationship after, or is it right from the word go? Their visions were so different. So when now it comes to trying to work with the resources that you have, they're pulling separate ways.
You're asking me a question within the family. Unfortunately, when they're coming to us, they're at the point where things are falling apart.
Right.
And I think that's one of the challenges as well. Our family laws are very much structured around families in crisis, not necessarily building a family or developing a family, because the law has its limitations. In terms of, if I can answer it in terms of when they're coming to the point of parting ways, it will be a question of, from the point we were married, given all that we've put into the marriage, the relationship, the building of assets and finances, what did everybody put in? And what everybody put in is direct financial contribution. It's indirect financial contribution in terms of paying other bills on the side, that sort of thing, and then non-financial contribution. That also counts as resources that you've put in to the kitty, if you call it that. So you'll be looking at all those things when you're then now at the point of trying to say, okay, so-and-so is going with this, so-and-so is going with this. You have to take all those things into account.
Is there a legal framework that protects everybody? Because now, for instance, if we take what you've talked about, maybe social input. For instance, if we give a scenario where the lady was not working, but was taking care of the children.
Yes.
And that is, when she's taking care of the children, the man is able to go work and ensure that those resources are available to do A, B, C, D. But now at the point of parting ways, how is that divided? Because hers may not be quantifiable in shillings and cents.
Yes, actually, this has been a long debate in terms of division of what we call matrimonial property that's acquired during the course of the marriage. Fortunately, there was an act that came in 2013, the Matrimonial Property Act, and it deemed contribution to include all those things that I've mentioned. Contribution is both direct financial contribution, indirect financial contribution, and all those softer things. It's childcare, companionship, working for the family business, being supportive. All those things are deemed as part of contribution because those things make it easier for us to acquire. When you have somebody supporting you, even at the level of work, you're able to do your work better. So you're able to acquire more, you're able to advance more. Those things are counted as part of contribution. What we don't have is a formula for quantifying them. But the court takes those things into consideration. It won't say, because you are not bringing in Kenya shilling, that you did not contribute to the acquisition of plot number 32 in Dakaine.
Yeah.
You are deemed to have an interest in that, even if it's registered in the name of only one person. If it was acquired during marriage, the assumption is that person registered it and took an interest to hold it in trust for their spouse. For
their spouse, right.
But it has to be a spouse. And I suspect we'll come to that in terms of who is deemed a spouse. Yeah.
Okay, we'll come to that in just a bit. Elsie, we also talked about intimacy being a major issue. Is this necessarily because there's a third party who's come into the relationship, or how is intimacy lost?
Oh, intimacy from a psychological point of view, I would say it is a mental thing. Because whether a third person comes in or not, how are these people in terms of connection, emotional connection? Because I would imagine when couples talk of intimacy being lost, where is it lost? At what point? What was the trigger? What were the circumstances around? For example, maybe dealing with a sick child, a sick parent, a sick sibling. A sibling is outside me, my husband, and our children. If he is handling a sibling or a parent, I'm handling a sibling or a parent who has an issue. The same mind that is supposed to process intimacy is the same one that is handling other issues out there. So how are we, as a couple, handling those other things to make it easy for us to handle each other here?
Okay, so is this something, and I'm trying to get to the part where, as a therapist, one can be helped, because intimacy sometimes is lost over a very long period of time, depending on the circumstances. Could even be nothing outside the two of them. Maybe could be stress, could be loss of a job, could be loss of a loved one, another one maybe. So how does one identify the telltale signs that our intimacy is getting to a point where it's, getting risky? Because I'm sure even in a relationship, there are times intimacy is lost, but not to a point where it is, how would I put it, that it is putting the relationship at jeopardy. It just needs to be reworked. But there are those that get to a point where, I'd call it the tilting point, where you're like, if we go any further, this is as good as done.
Now, that is really about understanding the other person. Because if we normally have people with different temperaments. In fact, it is very rare to find a couple who have the same personalities and temperaments. So how much do I understand the other person to be able to sense this person is not okay? And that means for me to be able to understand the other person, I understand myself first. Because understanding the other person is not going to class with the other person. Understand there is a way of becoming a self. That way you will be able to understand, because this person, we were not brought up in the same family. I am from another family. So how I became is different from how he became. If I understand my emotions and how to handle them, then I should take time to understand this other person. What kind of a person is he? How does he behave? How does he react or respond to something? And what can I read from his or her face? And this thing is really difficult when it comes to trying to understand men, because men sometimes are so quiet. When they are in a crisis, they won't talk.
They get into what they call the cave.
Yes.
The man
So
cave.
for me, as the wife, how do I understand him when he's in a crisis? If he's a jovial person, when he comes in from a situation of crisis, he will come in and I'll see,
There's something different.
there is something. But then, even as I want to understand what the situation would be, try to understand what climate are you in. Because maybe this person is at that point where I don't want anyone to talk to me. So if you ask that question at that point, he will blow up. First, normalize the situation. And it doesn't have to be professional, because we are not all counselors within the home. Just let it be. When you feel like he's ready to talk, maybe if it is about a scale of 1 to 5, if he can talk up to 1 or 1.5, that will give you a sneak preview of what is happening.
What the issue might be.
Yeah.
All right, let me come to you, Nyokavi. And now, from a legal perspective, who is a spouse? What does the government recognize as a spouse?
Okay, the Marriage Act of 2014 gives 5 types of marriages. Now that's where you get your spouse from. You are either married civil marriage, which is the one we know as AGs. You go to the AG's office, the registrar does the wedding for you. You are married Christian marriage with a minister of the faith who's licensed, which I think needs to be emphasized. And then you go to a church wedding or a garden wedding, depending on the license you get. Customary marriage, what we know as traditional marriage, that constitutes marriage in the country. Islamic marriage and Hindu marriage. Those are the 5 types of marriages in this country. There are no other types of marriage in this country. And I think one of the challenges is when this bill was coming into play, there was a lot of discussion about the 6-month rule. If you've cohabited with somebody for 6 months, you can be deemed a spouse. That was the debate that was ongoing. It was not put into law. So we still get many people coming in to talk about, oh, I'm married, I've been living with this person for 2 years. That does not constitute marriage in the law at present. Okay. And unfortunately, we have had a lot of debate in terms of the case law emerging, because the courts don't want to reject somebody. You know, you've been living with this person for 10 years. All your neighbors know that you're husband and wife. You have children together. And then now you're at the point of separating and one of you says, no, I'm not married to you. And I think courts are struggling to deal with the disadvantaged people in those scenarios, particularly children, and any rights that may be lost to them. But the truth is, in law, those are the only types of marriage. There are civil, Christian, customary, Islamic, and Hindu. And cohabitation is no longer a form of marriage in the country.
All right, and we are going to take a pause right there and come back and start from that. I'd like us to take a very short break and discuss the divorce. But remember, if you have any questions, I'll be looking through your tweets on social media to see whether you have questions that you'd like addressed by the very able panel that we have here. We take a short break. We'll be right back with the subject of divorce.